This time, hold it steady.
Where are you going?
Drop a bomb.
The era of Roger Moore is over. That's Timothy Dalton, the fourth actor to try his hand as Agent 007 in a major James Bond adventure. This one's called The Living Daylights. I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune.
And I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times. Our first movie is The Living Daylights with Timothy Dalton as the new James Bond. And I guess the question that people would like an answer to is, what kind of a James Bond does he make? Well, I give him a mixed review. Timothy Dalton is a good actor. He is very convincing in the movie's more serious moments. He has a great screen presence. He looks interesting. But if he has a weakness, it's the comic side of the character. With Sean Connery and with Roger Moore, you always knew that they saw the humor in James Bond, and I've always thought of this series as basically sort of a put-on plus special effects anyway. So with Dalton looking for humor, I wasn't so sure. Look, for example, at this scene involving a new edition of Bond's famous Aston Martin. Sean Connery had a lot of fun with the original version of this car, but Dalton plays it a little bit straighter.
What is it?
I've had a few optional extras installed.
Amazing, this modern safety glass.
The movie includes a full array of all the usual obligatory Bond stunts. Here's a cliffhanger on Gibraltar in a scheme that involves the Russians and a renegade American arms dealer who wants to smuggle opium from Afghanistan. To stop the plot, Bond disguises himself as an Afghan and plants a bomb in a plane load of opium. He almost gets away with it, but he's spotted by the villain, played by Jerome Crabb. This is the most spectacular scene in the movie. Bond and the bad guy's henchman, thousands of feet in the air, while Bond's newest girlfriend nervously tries to pilot that plane. That's Miriam Dalbo there, a former model, as the beautiful blonde. A lot of social observers have taken note of the fact that Bond, the old ladies' man, has a very conservative affair with just that one woman in this movie, unless, of course, you count the fact that in the pre-title sequence, they always have at least one scene where Bond drops in on some beautiful woman unexpectedly. Maybe that lack of Bond's traditional promiscuity in this film reflects the fear of AIDS in our society. I don't know, but it puts a lot of responsibility on Miriam Dalbo's shoulders as the only Bond woman in the whole movie. And after such legendary Bond girls as Ursula Andress, Maude Adams, Kim Basinger, and Britt Eklund, I frankly didn't find her very interesting. She just didn't seem to have the psychic weight to carry this role. She plays a Russian cello player who's innocently caught up in espionage, but the plot is never the point anyway in a Bond picture. It's just the relationships and the stunts, and my bottom line is the movie has great stunts, it has good special effects, it has a Bond who needs to work on his sense of humor, and it has a Bond girl who is not in the great tradition.
And
I should add thumbs down.
Me too, Roger. I was disappointed in the film. I'm not as impressed, actually, with Dalton as you are. He's better than Roger Moore, but for me, that's not much of a compliment. He's nowhere near Connery was. It's a classic figure. To me, he looked a little mousy. This Pierce Brosnan, I saw him in a new film coming up, Fourth Protocol. I think he might make a better Bond. He has more of the verve for life. This guy seems a little reticent. The other thing that you mentioned, I think, is very accurate about the Bond woman. She's not very appealing. And then the third point I'd like to make is all of the stunts that work are borrowed from the earlier films. The ticking clock down, remember how down to 007 in the original, they did it, the wheel, the spinning wheel. It's all taken from stuff before. They got nothing new here, really, Roger, and that's why it doesn't work.
I'm not sure exactly how much new you expected them to have. At this point in the series, they've exhausted the entire life work of Ian Fleming and everybody else who could think of a plot.
Exhausted.
I've got to go back now and defend Timothy Dalton. Now, you mentioned Pierce Brosnan, who was also offered this role. Dalton, I think, does have a very good screen presence there. I think that he's the last thing I would describe him as mousy. I think that's an astonishing thing for you to say.
Well, I did it. I called James Bond a mouse, and I live to say it. Our next film is a lackluster comedy called Maid to Order, starring the normally likable Ali Sheedy as a spoiled Beverly Hills brat whose father gets so angry at her, he wishes she was never born. Guess what happens next? Right, a fairy godmother appears, Beverly D'Angelo appears, and she explains to Ali Sheedy that now she is a nobody, that her father won't recognize her, that she has to do some selfless acts to regain her place in the world.
You're a spoiled, silly, boring, insignificant little twit.
Hey, who are you calling boring? Some fairy godmother you are. I thought you guys were supposed to turn maids into princesses.
Some princesses deserve to be maids. Oops, I'm getting ahead of myself.
The first thing Sheedy must do after she's been turned penniless is get a job. She becomes a maid in a rich Beverly Hills home. She is upset when she sees her father, Tom Skerritt, a multi-millionaire philanthropist, with her fairy godmother.
Oh, you'll have to excuse Jessie. She's part of a reverse affirmative action program.
I think I should put some water on this. Could you tell me where the,
Second door left.
So difficult to find good white help these days.
The only genuine characters in the film are a stereotypical cook and maid working in the same house, who are reluctant to help Sheedy with her job as a maid.
Can I borrow some jeans and a t-shirt? I want to wash my uniform. I don't have anything to wear. Thanks.
How you doing, Miss Woman?
I think I got up on the wrong foot with Maria.
Right.
I don't know how to talk to maids.
I don't know how you feel. One's trying to move into my neighborhood.
Audrey, can you show me how to use the washing machine?
What are you anyway? Some kind of reporter or something?
You wouldn't believe me if I told you.
Now, I've enjoyed Ali Sheedy in a couple of movies before. I liked her in War Games. I liked her in The Breakfast Club. But in this picture, as soon as the whole plot got started with the reverse Cinderella story here, a groan went up from me. And she actually isn't very likable in this film. She's supposed to play a snot, and I think she comes across as just a whiny brat. That's what she's supposed to play. It didn't really work for me. The picture seemed to be a gimmick. I was really only interested in the employees that she works for. I thought they were more interesting than she was.
Now, this is an interesting position that you've taken, because I would say that the problem with this picture for me was that she was not nearly unlikable enough.
Oh.
There is a kind of a bottom line of likability in Ali Sheedy. She is a pleasant young woman.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me that what the character needs to begin with is to be much, much rougher, to be much harder to get along with, much more egotistical, much more spoiled, much more of a brat, so that the change is more convincing. It seemed to me that she was always kind of basically the kind of person her fairy godmother was trying to turn her into.
What we could be saying is we didn't like the performance, one way or another. In other words, she wasn't given enough bad stuff to do, or she didn't play it badly enough.
Either the performance or the direction or the screenplay or something. I feel basically that the heart of the movie for me was Dick Shawn and Valerie Perrine, and that weird rock and roll couple. They were ripped off from Down and Out in Beverly Hills, but at least it was an interesting riff.
I would have rather seen a movie about them than about Ali Sheedy.
Okay, when we come back, we'll review The Lost Boys, who could all star in a remake of I Was a Teenage Vampire.
I'm your brother, Sammy. Help me!
It's named The Lost Boys, and this is a very ambitious, well-acted horror movie about teenage vampires in Santa Carla, which we are reminded more than once in this film is the mass murder capital of America, a sad distinction. This movie follows a trend I've seen in a lot of horror and science fiction movies lately. The sensational storylines from 1950s exploitation films are updated with good dialogue and production values and made into slick movies for the 1980s. That's what they did with The Fly. That's what they do here. This one stars Jason Patric as a new kid in town who sees a girl he likes at a rock concert. She's played by Jamie Gertz, and she is a vampire, something even Jason's little brother knows.
She's one of them! And don't tell me it doesn't make her a bad person, Mike.
You know where David took me tonight, don't you, Star?
Who's David?
Yes, it's my fault. If you hadn't met me, if I hadn't liked you, I tried to warn you.
It was that night in the cave, wasn't it? That wasn't wine they gave me to drink. It was blood. That was David's blood.
You drank someone's blood? Are you crazy?
Kiefer Sutherland stars as the leader of the vampires, and it's a good, tough performance.
You afraid to face me, David? Huh?
Tried to make you immortal.
You tried to make me a killer!
Are a killer.
I mentioned before that The Lost Boys is a well-made movie, and it is impressive. The performances are good, especially by Kiefer Sutherland and Jason Patric. The special effects are good. The vampire scenes look convincing, and some of the credit for all of that goes to the director, Joel Schumacher, who specializes in supernatural subjects and did that weird Shirley MacLaine movie a few years ago, The Possession of Joel Delaney. But Schumacher also has to take the blame for what happens to this movie. It starts out with a lot of interesting stuff in it, like a love affair between Diane Wiest, who plays the mother of those boys, and Edward Herman, who's a local businessman with a mysterious background. But then the ending of the film is simply action and special effects. The human relationships are all ignored. If you're going to make a convincing, realistic vampire movie, you shouldn't just go for the gore in the last reel, I don't think. This is a close miss, but I'm going to have to give it thumbs down because it doesn't live up to its original promise.
Well, that's exactly what I think. I think it's an overstuffed picture. I think this picture should have been stripped away. I mean, I think they have too many characters, too many things going on. I got interested in the adults. I got interested in the kid, especially that little brother played by Corey Haim. He says, "You drank blood," or whatever he says. It's a great line. It's just too full. And then you built up all this machinery, and then you unload it, sort of run it down a steamroller at the end with these people jumping through the air in a vampire fight. I'm exhausted in a picture that I could have liked.
It's a strange criticism to say that a movie is too ambitious, but in a way it is. It really is all over the map. And great performances, great actors in there.
I don't know about the word great. You're throwing that around a lot today.
Great is a good, good performances, good actors. How's that, okay?
I'm so glad when you agree.
Coming up next, Richard Dreyfuss and Emilio Estevez in Stakeout, a police thriller comedy.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's Richard Dreyfuss's latest picture. He's working so often these days. 3 pictures in the last year and a half, and that's good, because when he's on, he's terrific, and he certainly is the best element in the new buddy comedy and thriller called Stakeout, co-starring Emilio Estevez. Dreyfuss and Estevez play 2 cops assigned to spy on the apartment of a girlfriend of a criminal wanted by the FBI. They play breezy, playful cops who get excited looking at the young woman undressed.
To protect and to serve. Oh, I love my job so much.
Dreyfuss is even more bold than just looking at the young woman. He meets her, pretending he's a telephone repairman, and romances her, making Estevez furious that they might lose their job.
Hey, I'm serious, man. It ends right here. Either you break it off or you get your ass reassigned, because I'm not going down with you. I busted my ass to make detective before 30. I'm not going to let you that up. You got that, Chris?
Yeah, I got that.
Later on, Dreyfuss finds himself confronting the woman's killer boyfriend. She knows Dreyfuss is a cop, but her boyfriend doesn't.
So, Leachy, what are you doing bothering my old lady?
We had a fight.
Oh, you had a fight? That's too bad. What was it about?
None of your business.
Watch it now. It is all my business. Now, what was it about?
She found out I was violating my parole, okay?
Are you kidding me?
Stakeout is an uneven film. Dreyfuss is the only constant, constantly inventive and funny and sexy, but he leaves everyone else in the film in the dust. The film opens with needlessly brutal violence by the boyfriend, Aidan Quinn. The girlfriend, Madeline Stowe, is just a body, not a personality. And Estevez is simply out of his league here, I think. Even with a mustache, he looks like he's making a desperate attempt to keep up with Dreyfuss. So it comes down to how big of a Richard Dreyfuss fan are you? Would you want to miss him in a film in which he is very good? I wouldn't, but I can't recommend the film, just his performance.
Oh, I give the film a thumbs up, but just barely. It's right on the top of that invisible line, and I think I agree with most of your criticisms, especially the violence at the beginning. The whole movie starts out in the prison as being a really tough prison melodrama, lots of blood, lots of violence, and then suddenly turns into an entirely different kind of movie and then ends once again with one of those chases and shootouts that's phoned right in from the depository of broken scripts. So I don't know what to say, except I did like Dreyfuss so much that I did have a good time and I did laugh a lot.
Yeah, it's just that he is not supported by the rest of the movie.
We'll be back with our weekly video picks, including an Australian film about an Aborigine girl who wants to be a modern teenager. Weekly video segment, our choices of movies we think you might enjoy renting on video. And my choice this week is a wonderful movie named The Fringe Dwellers, about an Aborigine teenager in Australia. This is a 1986 film, brand new on video, which is directed by Bruce Beresford in between two big hits he made in America, Tender Mercies, which won an Oscar for Robert Duvall, and Crimes of the Heart, which earned an Oscar nomination for Sissy Spacek. And there is a performance every bit as good as those two performances in The Fringe Dwellers, a performance by a newcomer named Christina Nim as a girl who's been raised in an Aborigine settlement on the outskirts of an Australian city, but who does well in school and dreams of the great world outside her little one. She persuades her parents to buy a modern home and a housing development, but they're traditional people who have their doubts. Some of the moments in this movie really hurt, like this episode of stupid and cruel racism.
Like my brother's shirt we put in the second-hand shop. No, hope to see some people glasses there. Yeah. How do they call Aboriginals bull? That's the noise they make when they hit the blue bar.
You ought to be ashamed of yourself. I'm talking to you. Those kids have got as much right to be in here as anybody.
This is a movie that a lot of people missed when it first came out. It only played in a handful of theaters, but it's one of the most unforgettable movies I've seen in a long time, and it says something important, not just about those specific characters in Australia, but about all teenagers, and all teenagers' parents in a way, teenagers who want to do whatever is fashionable and parents who are perhaps too settled in their traditional ways. The family life in this movie is so close, so passionate, and seems so real, and the performance by Christina Nim is so good that there are times when it's heartbreaking. The Fringe Dwellers is a very, very good film.
I would maybe take out one of the varies and just say it's a very good film. Some of it seems a little bit pat to me. In other words, I know that there's going to be the break between the girl and the old-fashioned parents. And so when the story marches along in that way, I think I know what's going to happen. At the same time, the way these people play their situation out, that I think is played very well. The situation seems familiar to me.
We looked at a movie last week called Wish You Were Here about a young girl growing up in England. Now here's a young teenager growing up in Australia. On a double bill, the two of them would be very nice as partners because they show in different ways in different societies how some of these things are so universal.
And the thing that makes me sad is, of course, you're talking about foreign films of substance about young people and not in America.
God forbid there would ever be an American film that said anything about teenagers.
Well, you know, actually, we had one this year, The River's Edge.
Yeah.
Go and see that if it's still around, because that is terrific. It's probably going to be on my best 10 list. My choice this week for a video is an offbeat thriller called The American Friend, made by the young German director Wim Wenders. In The American Friend, Wenders tells the convoluted story of murder amid international art fraud, with Dennis Hopper playing a shadowy figure who sells paintings of a great painter whom everyone thinks is dead, and thus whose work is in great demand.
I sold one painting, I'm ready to sell another one. How much? It's $2,000 for you. I told you I got a good eye.
Take care of it. A new one's hard to buy.
Later, Hopper winds up taking pity on a German frame maker who is framed himself when he's told by mobsters that he has only weeks to live and should cash in by becoming a hitman. Here's an exciting piece of direction as the frame maker nervously tails a man who he's going to kill in the Paris metro. You've seen a lot of murders, you've seen a lot of things done in subways. That is a very well-directed scene, because this guy's been told to be cool after he shoots, and he's scared and out of control. It feels real. That's the excitement of this picture. The film is tough to figure out. It's more of an attitude than a story, really, a depiction of a cold, ruthless world where kindness amid murder is still something to be valued. The American Friend, directed by Wim Wenders, just released, definitely worth renting.
Definitely worth renting, in my opinion, too. I like all of his films. Kings of the Road is another one we both liked. A German who was so interested and has been since he was a teenager, I guess, in America, so that in this movie you can see the influence of all those 40s gangster movies, the lurid lighting, the big shadows, the dramatic acting. It's great.
And a number of those directors make appearances in the film. The first director we saw, the painter who's supposed to be dead, that's played by Nicholas Ray, a classic American director.
Now let's take another look at the movies we reviewed this week. We were both disappointed by The Living Daylights, the new James Bond movie, although I like Timothy Dalton a little better than Gene did. 2 thumbs down. 2 more thumbs down for Maid to Order, the fantasy about a spoiled brat who learned her lesson. We only really like the supporting characters. And 2 more thumbs down for The Lost Boys, the overstuffed teenage vampire movies. But finally, a split decision on Stakeout with Richard Dreyfuss and Emilio Estevez. I liked it a lot. Gene really liked Dreyfuss more than he did the movie. And so of the 4, the one that's best is Stakeout.
Clearly, and it's because of Richard Dreyfuss' performance.
Okay, the only thing I would say, though, is The Fringe Dwellers.
That's it for this week. Next time we'll be back with reviews of 4 more new movies, including the comic thriller Nadine, starring Kim Basinger and Jeff Bridges, and Back to the Beach, marking the return of Annette Funicello and Frankie Avalon in a surfing comedy. That's next week, and until then, the balcony is closed.
Raisinets and Goobers are playing everywhere, starring plump, juicy raisins and great golden peanuts. Both now feature creamy Nestle milk chocolate. Bacos adds that delicious bacony crunch to all your salads. Bacos. New Glade 2, the long-lasting air freshener that brings outdoor freshness indoors. New Glade 2. New Soft Sense Body Mousse with vitamin E, the body moisturizer that absorbs in an instant. Soft Sense Body Mousse with vitamin E.